It was the moment when the world's order began to fracture. No one knew exactly when the sun ceased its protection over the pharaoh's kingdom. It was only known that as the evening bells rang out from the temples along the banks of the Nile, the very air suddenly grew thick with the taste of iron. The abnormal transformation of the lifeblood. The Nile was more than a mere river. It was the lifeblood, the source of existence, and the pride of ancient Egypt. But as dusk began to cast its shadows, the water, once as deep and vibrant as an emerald, underwent a metamorphosis. This was no ordinary shift in hue caused by silt. It was a transformation of hellish nature. A deep crimson spread from the upper reaches with such terrifying speed that no eye could blink in time. It was the red of something freshly severed, a torrent carrying the souls of millennia of accumulated agony. The silver-scaled fish, the fisherman's pride, began to leap from the water in their final death throes, only for their bodies to dissolve into putrid sludge the moment they touched the sandy banks. The stench of death did not rise from corpses. It emanated directly from the water itself. It was the scent of absolute defilement, the odor of a world being stripped of its right to exist, whether in the water jars of noble households or the stagnant puddles in the slums. The water turned to fresh blood in unison. The horror lay not in the phenomenon itself, but in its absolute universality, from the opulent royal palaces to the most wretched straw huts. Nowhere was spared from the curse of the red. The silent screams of the gods. Deep within the dark crypts, the priests began to whisper of omens. Stone statues of the gods suddenly began to weep thick. Black droplets. Sacrifices became meaningless as the offerings themselves rotted upon the altars. Egypt, the empire of the gods, now stood before a naked truth. Their deities had fallen silent before a power far greater, more ancient, and infinitely colder. It was whispered that on nights of the blood-red moon, if one pressed their ear close to the water, they would not hear the rhythmic lapping of waves, but the frantic screams of thousands of souls imprisoned within the river itself. The river no longer flowed to nourish the land. It flowed to mark an end. This was no mere natural disaster. It was a retribution orchestrated with centimeter-perfect precision. No one dared to touch that pungent liquid. Those who intentionally drank of it, according to surviving manuscripts, transformed into living wraiths with bloodshot eyes and breath carrying the metallic stench of weaponry. Fear began to seep into every brick and every stone slab of the pyramids, rendering humanity's greatest achievements suddenly small and fragile before the breath of this commanding power. The Nile was no longer the river of life. It had become an open wound of the earth, a warning written in blood across the face of the desert, signaling that the old order had ended, and something far more terrifying was rising from the forgotten pages of history. Endless nights and the decay of power. The transformation of the Nile did not stop at being a bizarre natural phenomenon. It was the onset of a spreading rot. As the waters turned to blood, the very lifeblood of the empire began to disintegrate. There was no need for invading armies or slave rebellions. Egypt was dissolving from within, consumed by absolute, paralyzing terror. Within the palaces, where exquisite ceramic vessels once held sweet water from the purest tributaries, there remained only a thick, viscous fluid, bubbling as if seething with a nameless wrath. The royal physicians, possessors of the most profound knowledge, found themselves rendered useless. They stood trembling as they watched the servants collapse, their skin deathly pale, their eyes glazed, and their breath reeking of decomposition. When reality begins to warp, rumors began to spread like an unstoppable contagion. It was whispered that at the depths of the Nile, the gates to the abyss had been flung open. Creatures that did not belong to this world, entities formed of blood and putrid sludge, began to crawl from the riverbed on moonless nights. The gatekeepers of the capital recounted sightings of tall, malformed shadows with long, pallid, spindly limbs, walking atop the bloody surface of the river without sinking. They possessed no faces, only fissures oozing that pungent, metallic liquid. They did not kill with swords or spears. They killed through their mere presence. Anyone who met the gaze of these entities descended into madness, witnessing visions of the pyramids collapsing and sand and dust burying the monuments of a millennium. The collapse of faith. The pharaoh, who proclaimed himself the living embodiment of the sun god Ra, now sat upon his throne with trembling hands. The prayers of the highest priests in the temples of Karnak echoed hollow and lost. The incense smoke no longer drifted heavenward. Instead, it coiled into thick, blackened plumes that choked the statues of the gods, making their stone faces appear as if they were weeping tears of blood. This retribution was not merely aimed at royal power. It struck at the very pride of a nation. When the Nile, the wellspring of their economy, their faith, and their existence, turned to blood, the people of Egypt realized they had been rendered defenseless. No bow could strike the wrath of the heavens. No wall could block the scent of blood that pierced their minds. A constant reminder that they were but fragile creatures held in the palm of an unseen power. In those nights, all of Egypt sank into a terrifying silence. People dared not sleep, for in their dreams, they saw the river of blood rising, cresting over the embankments, sweeping away every fortress and citadel, turning the entire kingdom into an ocean of belated remorse. And from within that river of blood, an ancient curse began to resonate. Like a verdict set in stone since the dawn of time, life must pay the price with its own blood.